1867 Sports Show, back at you for another fantastic week of Canadian sports content. Episode number, Joffrey Reynolds, Calgary Stampeders. Great. Kyle Skinner, what's happening, man?
I love the enthusiasm you came out of the gate there with there. Normally you have this cadence as far as 1867 Sports Show. Coming in hot tonight there. I love it.
Yeah, you know what? It's kind of like a false sense of excitement that I got to put on right now because of obviously the way things have been going with the Oilers Star series thus far. But yeah, we'll just kind of fake the smile right now.
Do you want to peel the Band-Aid off right off the start, or are we saving that one for later?
Notice when I sent you the show notes, it was like in the very small print. It was like, let's see if we can just kind of gloss over that one. But yeah, let's go. Peel it off.
Well, you're feeling pretty good about yourself midway through the first period. It's not too often I get the kind of victory lap texts coming from you mid-game, at least, because you're not superstitious, but you are a little stitious.
I'm a little stitious, but yeah, you know, it wasn't even like a victory lap text. It was more like I like the way that they're playing type of text, right? They came out in the first period, they looked fantastic. Outshot Dallas, I think, like 14-2 in the first period. Obviously went into the break up 2-0. Everyone's feeling good. Actually,
and let me stop you right there. I think that this is the common thread here, right? Because you were feeling pretty good when they were shooting Vancouver 24-4 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And then the wheels also nearly came off there.
And this is a common thread for the Edmonton Oilers playoff run in 2024. I mean, I dozed off for a little bit in the second period, and I woke up and it was 3-2, and I was like, "What the hell happened?"
I left you alone for 5 minutes.
And then I see the highlights, and it's like, yeah, for a 10-minute span, Edmonton didn't record one shot on net, and Dallas spent, I think, 70% of the time in the Edmonton zone with puck control. So, yeah, 10 minutes to find an entire game for Edmonton once again. So let's hope that they can kind of get the wheels back on and get La Bamba flowing a little bit more, because haven't been hearing that one much in this series. So we'll just kind of keep our fingers crossed, and hopefully they can make some things happen there. So we still got faith in the boys.
Yeah. Well, you can, this is just the world of social media that we live in, because, midway through the first period, you've got Oilers fans just, we're a wagon, nothing's going to derail this train here. This is our year. And then by the end of the game, I even saw some tweets coming from the same accounts where it's like, fire everyone, Skinner needs to be put on waivers. It's just like, just swinging from one extreme to the other. Completely rational thought process going on in oil country these days.
Yeah, I actually have a couple of buddies who are Oilers fans as well, and it's the emotional high against the emotional low. And I got a message from one of them just saying, like, man, they look great tonight, everyone's flying around. And then by midway through the second period, it's like Darnell Nurse has the worst contract in the league, and his agent is stealing money from the Oilers. And it's like, look, I get it, everybody kind of goes from one extreme to the next, but at the end of the day, like I said, it's still only 2-1. At the end of the day, I think that Florida fans are in the same boat right now, where they've kind of clawed their way back and then lost 2 heartbreakers, right, in overtime. So if I'm a fan of Edmonton, I'm still, let's say if I am a fan of Edmonton, but I'm speaking to all the other fans of Edmonton.
Now they're making you question your fandom.
Now they're making my question my fandom. Yeah, but I'm speaking to the other Oiler fans out there. Just keep the faith, stay the course. They've shown resilience this year. So if we get down 3-1 going back to Dallas, then I might be a little bit more hesitant. But at the end of the day, like I said, they stole one on Dallas's home ice. Dallas came back and stole one on Edmonton. So look, if you go back to Dallas, tie 2-2, anything can happen in game 5. And then, hey, here we go. So keep the faith, and let's go Oil.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think a lot of Oilers fans as well, too, would have taken, a best 2 out of 3 series rather than a best out of 7 series against the Stars. So if you head back 2-2, the sky is definitely not falling on you anymore.
No. And I mean, look, Dallas is the number 1 team in the West. they're a good team.
Yeah.
So let's not be surprised that they actually play good hockey, because they're a good team. So,
They
anyways,
are who we thought they were. You want to crown them? Go ahead and crown their ass.
I think a lot of Edmonton fans are ready to crown their hats right now. But anyways, let's move over to some other hockey now that we're on the topic. And we kind of talked about it last week, just previewing the Memorial Cup. But now that we got things in full swing, been some pretty tight knit games so far in the first couple of days. And I will say my prediction of the Moose Jaw Warriors taking the Memorial Cup this year doesn't look as great anymore. But again, still in the thick of things. They've lost two heartbreakers again, the London and Saginaw. And the OHL is kind of priming themselves for a all Ontario matchup on home ice.
Yeah. Well, that's just it, right? Two wagons right now. Two and O teams and two 0-2 teams. So the parity isn't really there. Right now, it's essentially looking like, all right, once Saginaw and London clash, it's who's getting the first round bye and who's going to play the winner of Drummondville versus Moose Jaw there. So,
Yeah.
well, your prediction is still technically alive,
It is.
right?
It's still there. Again, we're not cashing in any checks right now. We're just gonna see how it plays out. Still got faith in the Western Giant out there. So I know, but yeah, London's got a good team. I watched a little bit of that game the other night. They're pretty good.
Yeah. Not sure if you saw this fun little addition, but it's been making the rounds on social media and even TSN and ESPN and all of them, they're playing it. The fight that happened in the London Moose Jaw game, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, all of a sudden we've got cameramen on the ice doing 360 like filming like it's the bullet scene in the Matrix going on here. What were your thoughts on that?
I mean, the fact that we're seeing a fight in junior hockey, I think, is great, because obviously that the CHL is doing everything it can to kind of ban fighting. The Q has already done it. I think the OHL and the Western Hockey League are very close to following suit. So it's kind of nice to see, some guys trying to galvanize some momentum for their club by chucking some knuckles. But yeah, the first thing you see when these guys start to square off is this little guy in a white suit just kind of skate by. It looked like Frozone from The Incredibles. He's holding a camera.
That
And
Olaf out there?
but yeah, it's something that I think if you were to show someone who's not familiar with hockey, they'd be like, WTF is happening right now? These
Yeah.
guys are fighting on blades on their feet, and you've got a guy in a little white spandex suit filming it.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't make any sense.
So here's my take on it, and it kind of goes for two different pathways here. Number one, I'm an advocate of, you know what, you can make penalties stricter and kind of the suspensions around it if someone crosses the line, but I still think fighting belongs in hockey. We can discuss that on an episode another day. But so from that standpoint, I loved the fact that we're getting creative with these camera angles. Bring it to the NHL level. I think that's one of the ways that you can creatively grow the game, because we're living in a quick little 30-second video soundbite world, and that's the kind of stuff that really gets people out of their seats, right? So on that front, loved it. On the other hand, like you were saying though, what is the CHL doing here? Because you're talking out of both sides of your mouth. You got the Q who's banned fighting. All the other leagues are trying to slowly phase it out. And now we're finding new and unique ways to glorify it and get up close action shots. So it's like, from my mind, loved it. But from a strategic CHL standpoint, like, what is going on with that decision making process there?
And I actually thought about this too, because obviously with the Q banning it and no one else, what happens if Drummondville's the home team and you have a fight?
Yeah.
Like, what do you do? You know what I mean?
It's me. Periods 1 through midway through the second period, we play CHL rules, and then second half of the second and the third, we're gonna go Q rules here.
Yeah, because I mean, they're all governed by the same entity. So I mean, it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility to say, well, technically, because they're the home ice, we're playing under Q rules. Here we are. But I'm a big advocate of, look, there's still a place for fighting in hockey. I think it's one of the things that kind of got lost in the shuffle, and it's kind of made hockey a different sport than what it was, right? Again, I'm not here to say, well, hockey used to be great and it's not great anymore because there's no fighting in it. That's
Make
not true.
hockey great again.
Everyone's going to be fighting. The Q's going to pay for it. It's going to be wonderful, fabulous. Okay. But anyway, it's just one of those things that just kind of got, pushed aside, like Walter Matthau now, pushed aside because they wanted to focus more on the goal scoring aspects and things of that nature, which is great because obviously the more goals get scored, people want to go see it. But, fighting in junior was always kind of something that I grew up watching, and that was what I anticipated when I went to a Sudbury Wolves game when I was little. Mm-hmm. You wanted to see the tough guys, and it's like, oh, the tough guys in the lineup tonight, that there's going to be a fight. Or, North Bay's coming into town. That's a big rivalry. It's going to be a line brawl. It's going to be fantastic.
What's the little kid checklist going to a hockey game, right? Get some sort of sweet snack, stay up past your bedtime, home team wins, see a fight.
Yeah.
That's it right there.
Yeah, and it's a great checklist. So I think it's good because it'll kind of show a lot of kids who haven't grown up seeing a lot of fights in hockey, just kind of the other element of it. And then their parents can kind of be nostalgic about it and explain it to them, right? Mm-hmm. So anyways, I think it was good. I thought it was even better seeing the little sperm guy, skating around the ice, taking the video of it. But yeah, I mean, let's hope we see another one because again, that was exciting and it was a talk of the town, right? So, yeah, I think the Memorial Cup is one of the best tournaments going, whether regardless of whatever sport it's in. So this just makes it that much more entertaining, that much more exciting for the average fan who's tuning in and watching these guys play.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. I just.
Yeah,
I would love to be a fly on the wall on whatever CHL kind of media meeting is going on there because I think they're talking out of both sides of their mouth at this point. So maybe we see more of it. Maybe this is the last time we ever see Frozone make an appearance on the ice there.
That's his new name.
Yeah,
we're gonna call that cameraman Frozone. But yeah, obviously we got some hockey stuff winding down and. Transitioning to another sport, which is more up my alley, the CFL training camp is winding down. Preseason is winding down. We're getting ready for the 2024 regular season. And I don't know about you, man. I've actually been looking forward to this one for probably more than any other season in the last 10 years. I don't know why. It's just like something's got me excited about this year. I think because there's a lot of potential for things to happen, right? There's potential for a massive shift in quarterbacks this year. Mm-hmm. There's a potential for finally getting the 10th team out on the East Coast. There's potential for all of these great things that have been promised over the last, 8 to 9 to 10 years to finally come to fruition. And I know for you, there's potential to finally get the statistics right so that way we can tune in and follow along live with statistics on the side. So
this is either the year that everything comes together or yet another glaring example in Kyle's list of grievances against the CFL.
I'm just going to say, you're one of those guys who licks the thumb. All right. Page 17.
It's Chris Jericho. You just made the list.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're getting some interesting things happening in training camp every year. You got new faces that come up that impress. They create their own roster spot, which means there's less roster spots for the well-knowns and the also-rans. And all of a sudden you can see guys getting cut. You see guys getting traded. This is kind of the fun part of training camp when it starts to wind down because you really start to see these rosters take shape. A couple of things, and these are just obviously, the quick hitters that everything is either great or everything is terrible, like we were talking about before, because everyone's going to be reacting to certain things. So Hamilton obviously took it on the chin in their first preseason game, and their new head coach and the well-traveled Scott Milanovich came out and just ripped into his roster and essentially stated, I got to do a better job at getting some guys in here who actually want to compete, and I got to make these decisions to get rid of the guys who don't.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is coming from a new coach to a team who's largely returning a lot of the same players from last year. This is screams to me you're overreacting to certain things that you're seeing on the field in a preseason game, but this also screams to me new coach trying to establish, this is the expectation that's here now. But as far as Hamilton goes, I think there's more pressure on them than anyone in the East right now because they were supposed to be the team last year, and obviously they fizzled out very early. And then you go see Toronto do what they do, and kind of that crosstown rivalry is really kind of sticking in their craw a little bit. So first impressions on the overreaction of Hamilton. Or let's just put it this way: overreaction or justified reaction to Hamilton's sky is falling after one preseason game.
Well, I think it was probably the latter of the two options that you were talking about there, right? It's a lot of chest thumping, and I'm the new guy in town, so we're gonna do it my way. And what used to fly around here is no longer the norm, and so I think it's a lot of coach speak, right? Like anyone who is making franchise altering decisions off of a preseason game probably wasn't a great hire in the first place. So I would hope that you're kind of taking that with a grain of salt there. But I mean, there's even some good takeaways as well too from it, right? Like you got to look at the fact that Bo Levi Mitchell shows up with a walking boot, first week of OTAs there, and he actually went out and had a solid quarter of football
Yeah,
there before he ultimately got lifted, and that's kind of where the wheels ultimately fell off after that,
which,
right?
which, which is standard. I mean, you're not going to see the same level of consistency, and if you do, then you got another problem on your hands because, we got this other guy who's not making nearly as much as our starting quarterback is, and he's actually doing it better with less talent on the field.
Yeah. Well, I think what the big takeaway here is you've got a really unique situation that Hamilton finds themselves in, right? You've got the big bad Toronto Argonauts are without their starting quarterback for half the season. I'm sure we'll touch on it at some point, but like who even is taking snaps right now? That's still up for debate at this point here with
Mm-hmm.
double blue. You've got Montreal, who everyone kind of thought, all right, they're on the upswing, but I don't think too many people said, "Yep, Grey Cup champs," had them picked at the beginning of the season. So they're probably a little bit ahead of schedule. You've got
Look,
the Red Blacks, who have just been the doormat of the East for the several seasons now, who, you know what? They're starting to look pretty good out there. And especially for a team that left behind a lot of starters and a lot of veterans and was like, you know what, we're leaning into new faces and go out there and earn your roster spots. There were a lot of people who really turned some heads in that first preseason game. So I think Hamilton's kind of looking around going like, huh, if we don't get things figured out in a hurry here, we're probably going to be the doormats of the East here because even with Toronto having some question marks under center, there's still a solid roster out there. Whereas Hamilton seems to be kind of that swing team in the East as far as they get everything to line up their way, they could win the entire division. If things start falling apart, they could very easily be in for a long summer of losing football down in Steel City there.
yeah, and yeah, I'm 100% in that mindset too. I mean, I think Scott Milanovich is very well traveled for a reason. He's a very good coach. Worked with some very, very, very high profile teams in the CFL and NFL. So yeah, I think that he's just trying to make sure that everyone understands that being mediocre, even in preseason, it's not good enough, and you have to be sharp 24/7. And yeah, but I mean, I think a lot of people come out and say like, "Oh man, like coach doesn't like our roster. Like we're gonna start panicking, and here goes another sad time in Hamilton this year." But yeah, I mean, I look at that, and then I look at the other end of the spectrum because I'm pretty sure the people of Saskatchewan are already planning the parade after an undefeated preseason by the Rough Riders.
There you go. I mean, get the watermelons hollowed out already. Saskatchewan there, but yeah, I mean, you kind of look at, and I was taking a look at some of the sports books, and most of them kind of had it in the same region here. Obviously, most of them still favoring Blue Bombers or the most heavily favored. And then it goes Argos, Owls, Lions, Ticats, Rough Riders, Elks, Stampeders, Red Blacks are the furthest long shot, which those odds might be changing if they keep putting together a few more performances like they just did.
I
But
agree.
again, this is one of those things where kind of a changing of the guard in the West. Is that going on right now? The Blue Bombers, they've had some retirements, they've had a few departures there roster wise. So they could arguably kind of be that team out on the West side that Hamilton is on the East, where they've got a huge range of outcomes for them. I
Yeah.
think there's some clubs you look at them and you go, you know what? As long as we see tangible progress this season, we can get behind that, right? If the Red Blacks are in the playoffs, even they bow out in the first round, I think
Hey,
the fans will take that after the last couple of seasons here in Ottawa.
100% they would.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then out west, right? You've got some other teams like the Elks who, even if they win a couple more games and they just play exciting football, right? Because we've already talked about it previously. There was a stretch of the season last year where it was just almost unwatchable as a fan.
If they go 500 at home this year, I think that's progress, and
Absolutely.
that's a successful season for them. But again, with a 9-team league, you could be the last place team by a mile in 2023 and come out and be the Montreal Alouettes of 2024 and make a run to the Grey Cup.
Exactly. Right. And so Saskatchewan's in a bit of a unique situation where I think there's a portion of that fan base who kind of sees, you know what? Winnipeg could be slipping off, and they've had several years atop that division of we're battling for second place as of week 4 of the regular
Yeah,
season here. So I
yeah,
think a lot of them are getting pretty excited about that. But we already said with Hamilton, if you're making grand proclamations off preseason football where over half the starters aren't even in, shoulder pads. Don't know what to tell you. There's not a ton that can be gleamed from preseason because you can't win championships in preseason. You can lose them though with a
yeah,
whole slew of injuries. So I think for them, it's just, hey, you know what? We played some good football before week 1, coming out of it relatively healthy. Winnipeg kind of looks susceptible out there. Maybe it is our season.
yeah. And I think there's a lot of optimism even before the 2 preseason games because of your new head coach, Corey Mace, very high profile coordinator in the league, played in the league for a long time. So, I mean, he knows it very well. I think a lot of people were interested to see where he was going to land
Mhm.
this offseason because he was kind of the guy, right?
Yeah.
So the
It
fact
wasn't will he land somewhere, it was where will he land?
where, yeah, exactly. So the fact that he's come in and they look good, so far, and it's not just the starters that look good; it's the second and third stringers that also kind of look like they're playing sound football right now. So I think that's kind of reassured a lot of people's optimism. And not only that, I mean, there's an interesting name on their roster right now at quarterback. And again, I know a little bit about him being a Michigan fan with Shea Patterson. And he kind of suits the CFL better than I think a lot of people realize because he's got a decent arm. He's very mobile. He's very smart. And ultimately, he was a winning quarterback in the NCAA, which is very hard to do, especially when you play in a conference like the Big Ten.
Mhm.
And I think that when you see a guy like that do some things that he's doing right now, it kind of gives you that relief. Like, because, we've mentioned it on the show many times, having a good backup in the CFL is better than having a good starter in the CFL, to be perfectly honest. So when you can have a guy who's cheap, who can do things that your starter can't, so that way, if your starter gets hurt, you actually have a new dynamic that comes in at backup. It kind of just gives you that reassurance, not only from a coaching staff or a management perspective, but from a fan's perspective as well. So there's a lot of reasons for Saskatchewan to be excited going into week 1. And I think that ultimately they're looking at this season as being kind of that redemption season. They went through a few blasé years with Dickinson as the head coach. You didn't really see, didn't hear a lot about them unless they were putting quarterbacks out for the season. And you didn't really notice the Saskatchewan Roughriders very much. And the CFL is always a better league when Saskatchewan is competitive.
Mhm.
So the fact that they're looking like they're on their way back there just bodes so well for not only. I think that's kind of why the optimism for me is coming back up, because I'm seeing these teams that I grew up watching be kind of the dominant forces kind of come back and reestablish themselves there. So You know,
Feels like there's a lot more parity this year than in years
huh,
past, where you get
absolutely.
already penciled in, like, all right, Calvillo and the boys are going to represent the East in
Yeah,
Montreal, and so
Calvillo and Ricky Ray again for the Grey Cup. Let's see
yeah.
who can win this one. But yeah, and before we move on to our next topic, I have one thing that I need to get off my chest, and this is from an Ottawa perspective. Okay.
Did someone else steal your song and dance routine at training camp that you need to put on blast here?
No, it only happened once, and I've never forgotten it. But
Yeah, we've already axed that vendetta on
yes,
the show, so there you
we
go.
we've cleared the air on that one. We're good to go. Jonesy and I are back on good terms. So, um, but can the schedule makers please stop giving Ottawa the first week bye? It drives me bonkers that every single season it's like, oh, and Ottawa starts their season in week 2 again, and Ottawa starts their season in week 2 again. I don't know why you have to do that every year. It's like, unless Ottawa's going out and asking for it, no team wants to have a bye in week 1.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we just even had, from an NFL perspective there, the two Kelsey brothers, they're going through the entire schedule there on New Heights, and they're saying everyone that I know hates the early bye. And they're complaining
Yeah,
about a week 6 bye for the Kansas
yeah,
City Chiefs right now. They're like, I can't stand the early bye. So imagine it's all right, everyone else is up and running, but also a problem that you have when it's an odd number team league. So
yeah,
let's get that 10th franchise out there so we can have a full kickoff in week 1 here, folks.
yeah. And I understand. Look, scheduling is tough. You and I know that all too well, doing it from a hockey tournament perspective. It's difficult. There's a lot of, mathematics that go into it, right? But at the end of the day, you have 9 teams. Let's just kind of share the wealth a little bit. So that way we're not always giving it to certain teams. Because, I mean, you're 100% right. As a player, as a coach, you prefer a late buy 10 times out of 10. No one wants an early buy. I will guarantee you that. So if for some reason Ottawa is requesting it, I want to have a conversation with whoever is requesting it because it makes zero sense to me. And I'll guarantee you the players hate it because, again, no one wants it. Your body's feeling good going into week 1. This is the healthiest you're going to be all season. So let's get out in the field and actually see what we can do because that's the game where, one, you don't want to be making mistakes in week 2 with a team who's already gotten most of their mistakes out of the way in week 1, right? You want to kind of iron those things out in week 1 heading into week 2. So it was just kind of an axe to grind because as soon as I saw the schedule come out again, I'm like, really? When I worked there, all 3 years we had a first week bye every single year. Like, how does that work? There are 9 teams. There's 8 teams that are kind of laughing, saying, "Well, we know Ottawa's going to get the first week bye, so we're good." But all
It's
right,
a tradition unlike any other. The hell
you
with
know what?
Augusta National.
Yeah,
The real tradition. CFL putting the screws to the Ottawa Redblacks week 1 here.
it's 100% accurate. You hear the Jim Nance voice come in.
Yeah.
It's great. But before we move on, like who are you picking out of the East and West to represent the Grey Cup this year?
Wow. If the Red Blacks are going to be coming out at plus 2,200 odds, I might just sprinkle a little something on them just in case the stars align there because, I don't think they're quite as long a shot to come out of the East given the current state of the Argonauts as maybe some of these sports books think. But I'm going to go BC coming out of the West, and I am going to go. You know what? I'm gonna say Montreal comes out of the East again.
BC and Montreal. So I like your take on that because one, I think Montreal is well suited to make a good run to repeat. Um, I'm gonna go with what seemed to be the Grey Cup matchup every second year, kind of before the Alouettes and old Edmonton Eskimo franchises used to collide all the time. I'm going to go with your BC pick because I think that BC is well suited. They're very strong across the board, and I'm going to go with Toronto. I
Huh.
think that
Okay.
I
All
think
right. So
that
before we deep dive on that, who do you got out of Dukes and Arbuckle taking snaps for the first half of the season?
you know what I
Because they got to keep that ship afloat.
they
They
do.
can't go 0-9 and then
And
expect to
and
run.
here's the reason why I'm picking Toronto is because I think that with everything going on right now, the players can ultimately go out on the field and just play with no pressure on them, right? The pressure's on management, the pressure's on the league, the pressure's on Chad Kelly, the pressure's not on the current players,
Mm-hmm.
right? Unless it comes out that some of them knew what was going on and tried to hide it as well, right? But again, we won't dive into that because everything is still up in the air. So at the end of the day, I think that if they can weather the ship, this is kind of going back to the deflate gate type of thing, right? With Tom Brady. You know, all people said if New England can get out of this stretch at 1-3 or 2-2, they're good. They're going to be well suited because they've overcome that adversity early on.
Mm-hmm.
This is something where I think if Toronto can come out and play good football and ultimately, come out of that first, half of the season at 500 or better, what do they have to lose? Because at the end of the day, who says that Chad Kelly's even going to be playing after that, right? Because if all these things start to kind of snowball the way that we've seen them snowball in the past, I really don't see Chad Kelly playing a lot of football this season.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, between the two
I was going to
quarterbacks,
say, you're doing an awful lot of tap
yeah,
dancing around answering the
yeah,
quarterback question.
yeah, between the two quarterbacks, I I was high on Nick Arbuckle's game, but he's kind of one of those guys who shows you a lot of flash and then just the wheels fall off, right? So I'm going to go with Dukes to be the guy who kind of comes out of this thing to be that starter and kind of take over as the new Chad Kelly,
Mm-hmm.
like we saw when he took over as a rookie. So I think that there's a lot of similarities to that team that ultimately went on that Grey Cup run back when Chad Kelly took over, and yeah, I think that Toronto is was a very hard nosed team, and they can wade through a lot of adversity, especially if they get through that first stretch, like I just mentioned. I think they're well suited to make a good run at the Grey Cup again this year.
No, no, it's a really well put together team, right? It's just, we've said it 100 times. CFL is a very quarterback driven, pass happy league here. So it's going to be crucial for whoever is taking snaps as of week one to hit the ground running. And, if they're able to come out anywhere close to 500, and then, do we need to insert Kelly back into there right away? Or can we even afford to have him kind of, take another week or two to really get his feet underneath him? That's a good luxury to have. And I think with how wide open the East is, I don't see that imminent threat as far as like, well, chalk up, guaranteed 4 losses right here when they go head to head with these two clubs. Like, they'll be in the thick of things, right? But
Yep.
it's just, will their defense be able to hold them into enough games to keep them competitive? Because I don't see them scampering out there and putting up 35 plus points on a weekly basis like they were in the Kelly era. But is 25 enough, right? So it'll be interesting to see for sure. But yeah, I guess we're both pulling for your former club out there on the West Coast for our predictions to come true, though.
Yeah, and like I said, I think that we even talked about it, when we had Andrew Jones on. They're just a well put together franchise, like we just mentioned with Toronto. But BC has kind of been building something out there over the last couple of years, and it hasn't really come to fruition yet. And I
Mm-hmm.
think this is probably the year that they could probably take that next step up, because we saw when they were competing, going head to head every week with Winnipeg. When Winnipeg was kind of the gold standard of the CFL, BC was right there with them, and they probably have the best quarterback that nobody knows about, even though Vernon Adams Jr. has been putting up video game type numbers the last couple of years. Everyone was still kind of saying, well, they don't have Nathan Rourke. They lost Nathan Rourke. The fact that you had Nathan Rourke and Vernon Adams Jr. on the same roster, that's pretty impressive.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that having that guy at the helm just puts them at such an advantageous position, especially with all the quarterback movement that's been happening the last couple of years. BC's kind of been that one stable, quarterback, sanctuary where you've only had one or two guys suiting up over the last 6-7 years, which is a great thing to have. So, yeah, I think BC just kind of bodes very, very well for themselves when they take the field because, they're well coached. They've got an owner who obviously is investing a lot of resources into the club, which makes it that much better for the players. And they're going to play like that. And not to mention, you can't have 50 Cent opening up your home opener and not, go to the Grey Cup. Like that's just kind of a storybook written for itself there. So, yeah, I think BC's got a really good chance at winning in 2024.
Yeah, 50 Cent home opener en route to the playoffs has a much better ring to it than 50 Cent home opener winless season kickoff here. So, speaking of Nathan Rourke, though, look at this little
Yeah,
tie-in. It's almost like we planned it here.
almost like we plan things, but we don't, guys. We don't. Like we're two dads who are just exhausted that just come on here and throw some stuff at the wall, see if it sticks. So, anyways, continue on, Nathan Rourke.
Yeah. Well, first of all, belated happy birthday to him because he just turned 26 years old last week. So, Mr. Nathan Rourke currently bouncing around. All right, we haven't done a golf clap yet. Actually,
Yeah,
you know what?
exactly.
Good for you. Good for you. Celebrate the little things in life there.
Yeah.
But Nathan Rourke, kind of bouncing around NFL spheres these days. He's been in Jacksonville. He's been in New England. He's now up in New York. But kind of an interesting pathway out in front of him here now in terms of what the future holds for him and how much longer he could be south of the border. Is coming up back to Canada still in the cards if this stint with New York doesn't work out? So lots in play for everyone's favorite Canadian born QB there.
Yeah, and anyone who's kind of watched Nathan Rourke play from his time in the NCAA to his time, short time in the CFL, and obviously with his preseason, that preseason magic that people have seen, they see a special type of quarterback there, right? The guy was a very unheralded prospect coming out of Ohio, but when you watched him play in MAC conference games, he was dominant. He was absolutely dominant. Then he comes up to the CFL, and obviously in a very short, window, he's already getting compared to guys like Doug Flutie and Warren Moon, which, like, in Canadian football lore, there is no higher praise than getting compared to Doug Flutie and Warren Moon. Gets a chance to go down to the NFL, obviously fantastic, opportunity for him, and goes out with the Jacksonville Jaguars last preseason and just makes some of the most electric plays that you ever see a quarterback make. And then, as we know, political games start to come in where it's like, well, we already got Trevor Lawrence, so he's not going to, unseat him, but can he vie for that backup spot? Well, the numbers game doesn't really shake out. We're not going to keep 3 quarterbacks this year, but we're going to put him on our practice roster and call him up in case anything happens. By all intents and purposes, you hear all these great things that, he's performing well in camp. He's performing well, in practices. He's on the verge of getting called up, and this never happens, right? So eventually, yeah, you get released. You get, you catch on with a team like the New England Patriots, who, has everyone who watched them last year, were pretty needy at the quarterback position. So you figure, hey, great landing spot for him. He could actually get some meaningful starts, meaningful minutes playing for a team like New England. Doesn't come to fruition. Now, fast forward to this offseason, everyone was kind of thinking, well, this is a perfect opportunity for him to come back. The CFL is kind of looking for that next star quarterback, and what better way to do that than welcome back kind of everyone's favorite son, the homegrown Nathan Rourke. And then the New York Giants swoop in and say, nope, we're going to put that dream on hold for a little bit more because we have our own quarterback issues that we want to take care of. And yeah, I mean, Brian Daboll has said pretty much all the things that you'd want to hear if you're Nathan Rourke. He possesses everything that we ask for out of a quarterback. He's a smart player. He's a leader whenever he's on the field. And you telling me that anyone is comfortable with Daniel Jones being out there for a full season, whether you like his game or not? The injury history alone says that probably not going to last another full season with New York. So Is this another opportunity for Nathan Rourke to potentially, and again, I use air quotes, as our aforementioned Donald Trump would say, bigly. I use air quotes, bigly. Is this an opportunity for him to finally get a chance to show what he can do at the NFL level? There's a lot of people who will say the best job in sports is the backup quarterback because you get paid a lot of money to hold the clipboard. And when you come in, you're everyone's darling, everyone loves you. And at the end of the day, there's no pressure on you to do anything. You look at what happened with the Giants last year with Tommy DeVito. That guy had nowhere in the world to be on an NFL football field. And all of a sudden he's getting marketing deals and his agents getting filmed every time they show him because he's dressing like a wannabe gangster. And it's just like
Joe Pesci's stunt double from Goodfellas.
But that's just the type of thing that I think media, especially in New York, they love to run with. So in the event that something does happen, well, Nathan Rourke can be the story this year. That's, a Canadian kid who's finally getting a chance to play, and he's the first Canadian quarterback in the NFL since Mark Rippon, and yada, 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 right? So, yeah, I mean, I think if you're Nathan Rourke, you keep the dream alive as long as you can because you're making really good money. Your body's not getting beat up, and you have the chance to be an NFL starting quarterback, which is every young person's dream when they start playing football. Yeah. Right now, the consolation prize going to the CFL and being the face of the league, also not a bad thing either. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how, the offseason still kind of plays out. And if it comes to that point where, all right, well, he's kind of on the roster bubble, so let's see what happens. I don't think that Nathan Rourke is necessarily going to be, scooped up by another team if he gets put on waivers again by the Giants. That could be an interesting little, turn of the tides if he ends up, being a free agent again in a CFL team who's kind of on the verge of, well, we're there, but we're not really seeing, as much out of the quarterback position that we want. Well, let's make a phone call and throw some money at Mr. Rourke to come up and potentially be that savior / face of the league that the CFL desperately needs at this point.
Yeah, I think however this all ends up shaking out, we're going to kind of look at this season at a pretty pivotal point in his career because we're going to figure out one thing or another. Either he's going to catch on with an NFL team or he's going to have to make the decision of, am I getting paid well to hold a clipboard or do I want to actually compete?
And do I want to play?
Yeah. Well, you know what? For some people, right? Like, there's a lot of people who say, no, I'll take the pay cut to compete. Well, once those checks start clearing there, you might have a different opinion, right? So it's very much is his decision as far as what do you want to do? Do you want to be a career backup or do you want to be the guy, but just maybe on a smaller stage at less money, right? So that's something only he's going to be able to answer. But you look at the career path he's been on. I always found it strange that he signed with Jacksonville of any of the teams, just because of the fact that, and this is before we've had the last couple seasons of a little bit of struggles. And, is Trevor Lawrence really the generational talent we thought he was coming out of Clemson and all those narratives? Like when he first signed on with them with that 3-year deal, he was freshly drafted. So you already know in no world, barring an ACL tear in training camp, are you sniffing the field, right?
Yeah.
So why he kind of, as the all heralded chosen one from up north, and like people in NFL circles knew of him. So why he kind of chose that as the destination as opposed to a quarterback needy team where, hey, we're not saying that you got a 50-50 shot, but our starting position is very much up for grabs in training camp.
Yeah.
That's maybe a sliding glass door moment of his career that if he had a do-over, maybe he would redo it.
Well, no state tax in warm weather is pretty good too. So I mean,
yeah. Well, there's other states that have no state taxes either. But I digress. Then he goes up to New England, and like you, this is where I thought, especially given the dumpster fire that was that quarterback position last year, I thought this is where at some point, even if it's for 3 minutes of mop-up duty in a blowout, we're gonna see him take the field. Nope. Bill Belichick's going down with the ship with Bailey Zappi and Mac Jones. And, I don't know if they had some sort of incriminating photos of old Billy B there or something, but why he continually trotted those two out when every single fan from, Dorchester to Foxborough could have told you what the outcome of those games were going to be. I have no idea. Doesn't get played up there. New York now, like you said, we're now at the point here with Daniel Jones where even though you spent all this money on him, Broncos have opened Pandora's box here, right? These giant dead cap hits are going to sometimes be kind of a norm going forward where, hey, salary cap's going up every year. These streaming services are tripping over themselves to add zeros to the amount of money they're going to throw at the league here. So, you know
Yeah.
what? We make a few bad financial decisions, we can swallow, right? So I don't think Daniel Jones, whether it's going to be replaced by Rourke or someone else, is going to be the starter by 2025. Is kind of my prediction here. This is the last year of the Daniel Jones experiment in my mind. But even look at that depth chart. Daniel Jones,
Hmm.
who, well, you've got the injury history and the poor play, some combination of it. He's not going to be the starter. Hopefully, if the Giants are have any realistic chance of competing here down the line. Drew Lock, who we've seen him bounce around from team to team to team and has never caught on with any of them. Tommy DeVito, who we already talked about, and then Nathan Rourke. That is, again, looking around that quarterback room. If you're Nathan Rourke, you've got to have the internal confidence of going like, I think I'm better than everyone that's sitting around me. And I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of people that are in high positions of power in the football industry, whether it's in the CFL, NFL, NCAA, scouting services, whatever, who probably feel the same way. So
Hmm.
the real question is, does he get the fair shot at it? Because in my mind, like, what are you doing? Like Tommy DeVito, nice story, right? Cut.
What would you say you do here?
What would you say you do here? But so he's an easy cut to me. So if you're going to keep three, it's going to be Locke, Rourke, and Daniel Jones in my mind. Then that's a pretty easy decision to make right there
Yeah.
with very little financial repercussions. Then you got to think, all right, Locke couldn't catch on with a very QB needy Denver Broncos team. Then he gets shipped out to Seattle, where, oh, you're going to now be the guy. Because at this point, everyone had written off the corpse of Geno Smith. And he
He
instantly
didn't write.
loses,
Didn't write back.
yeah, instantly loses that quarterback battle. Right. So he's had multiple opportunities, and we've actually seen him in some NFL action, and 'twasn't pretty. So I think we kind of know what we're getting with him as well, too. Why not in a season where if the Giants aren't picking in the top 5 next year, I would be absolutely shocked. Why not take a look and
Yeah.
see if you've got something here,
Yeah.
right? So if he doesn't get into an NFL game this season, like I said, even if it's for 3 minutes of mop up duty when you're getting blown out by 40, I would be pretty shocked at just the piss poor asset management that's going on there with the New York Football Giants. As an Eagles fan, thrills me to no end if that's the outcome that ultimately ends up playing out. But from a Canadian football perspective, what do you have to lose? Because this is a team that is going to struggle to move the ball up and down the field. Defense is going to be all right. And if they have any shot at staying even remotely competitive, it's going to be on that side of the football.
Yeah.
Offensively, you don't have the Saquon safety valve anymore. Darren Waller, is he going to retire? Is he going to be cut from the team outright? Doing all sorts of weird stuff on social media? Is going through a divorce? Like, who knows? Huge question mark there. Wide receivers, you got Malik Neighbors and 30 slot receivers who all do the exact same thing. That is literally their wide receiver group. So this is not the, greatest show on turf Rams here on the offensive side of the football. Why not see if you can get someone who is mobile, who can throw on the run, and who has potentially, some real untapped offensive potential under center there, and just see, even if it's for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Because to me, if it doesn't work out with the Giants, this is now kind of three swings at it, and you got to look at yourself in the mirror because you'll be going into your age 27 season now. And this is typically when a lot of these rookie quarterbacks are signing their mega extension deals coming out of, first round, second round, whenever they got selected here. So if you're still living that kind of practice squad lifestyle, do you want to compete, or do you want to kind of resign to the fact that you're going to be at most a glorified third stringer for the rest of your career?
Yeah, a ton of good points by you, because you kind of mentioned that regardless of how things shake out, if you're still in that question of, am I going to be the 2 or the 3, that's when you see the political stuff start to come out, right? Who fits better in the locker room? Who knows who in the scouting department? Who did we invest more resources in to get here? Like, those are the types of things that come in, right? So 100%, I think that Nathan Rourke is good enough to be in the NFL. Don't get what I was saying earlier twisted. I think he is 100% good enough to be in the NFL. Whether he gets a fair opportunity or not is another question. So, what I can see him doing very well, and where he can kind of carve out a nice niche, and like, I think that he can be kind of like the Gardner Minshew, in the NFL, right? Like
So
an
he
extreme
needs to invest in some aviators and leather jackets, is what you're saying.
and
Maybe a
grow
Fu
Fu,
Manchu
grow Fu
mustache.
Manchu. Yeah. But like, from what I mean by that is, Gardner Minshew is probably the best backup quarterback in the NFL. I think anyone would be comfortable with Gardner Minshew as their number 2. Some teams would even be comfortable with him as their number 1, as we saw Indianapolis didn't miss a beat when he was, kind of taking snaps from under center when Anthony Richardson went down.
And we might even
He's
see the Las Vegas Raiders do that as
yeah,
well too this year.
absolutely. And I mean, you look at the numbers, because you mentioned Trevor Lawrence earlier. If you look at the numbers when Gardner Minshew, in the same stretch of games like Trevor Lawrence has had, he actually has better numbers with a much more subpar offense with Jacksonville. So I look at Nathan Rourke as being that type of quarterback where, if he can kind of carve out that one good season as a backup, come in, play some games, and look the part, he can have an NFL career for the rest of the time he wants to play football.
Yeah.
And because better than anybody, once you get into that stratosphere of like a top, 5 to 10 backup in the NFL, you're made in the shade, because you're making $7 to $15 million, right? Depending on how much money the team is paying you, or the team has at their disposal. And then you're like, okay, I'm okay making $10 million a season to not be the starter, right? that kind of changes that question altogether. But
Needs to
at
pick
the
up
end
the
of
phone and call Case Keenum there and take some career advice from him. He's done
you
all
know,
right for himself.
yeah, like the Chase Daniels, the Case Keenums, like they do pretty well for themselves, being that it's kind of like in baseball where you got that, the lefty coming out of the bullpen. Like, you can be around forever as long as you want. You come in and be a smart, serviceable backup, you got a job for the rest of your life. So
You give me 5 good innings, you can continue playing till you're 45 years old, Bartolo Colon. Go
yeah.
ahead.
Hey, Jamie Moyer, I know you only throw a 75-mile-an-hour fastball now, but let's just keep signing you to $10 million contracts. But yeah, I think that Nathan Rourke definitely has a place in the NFL. Whether he gets an opportunity fairly or not is another question. But it's a nice feeling knowing that you can come back to the CFL, be the highest paid player in the league, be the face of the league, and ultimately, I think, could take the CFL to new heights if they do what you and I had mentioned long ago and market the hell out of him,
Mhm.
right? So
Just
Yeah, I think
waiting
he.
for that 10th franchise out east, and he's going to
Yeah,
be the darling of Halifax, Nova Scotia.
he'll it's like any given Sunday when Al Pacino takes over the Albuquerque job and makes Willie Beeman his new starting quarterback. Like
Yeah.
that's exactly what we're looking at with Nathan Rourke. But yeah, I mean, obviously, I want to see him do well in the NFL, but would love to see him come back up here if it doesn't work out and excel, the way that he was before he got hurt. So again, future is bright for him regardless of what he wants to do, and I think that he could be an absolute beacon of light for Canadian quarterbacks, which has been a kind of a dreary road, for the last 50 to 60 years for sure.
Yeah. And with all that being said, if the New York Giants would like to start Tommy DeVito 2 times this season, I can give you suggestions for what those 2 weeks should be.
We're not trying to influence anything.
Yeah.
We're just kind of giving you a suggestion as to when it would be prudent for that to happen.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
it's our first year without Boston Scott, so I don't know what's going to happen here with the penciled in 3 touchdowns there. So
they need to find another 5'6", 200-pound running back somewhere. Where are they going to find that?
yeah. Those don't grow on trees.
I mean, they grow in Philadelphia apparently because they always have one.
Yeah. Oh man.
But last thing you wanted to mention, there's something big brewing in Canada. Again, we're seeing just an explosion of new league, explosion of new teams, and you brought one to my attention right before we hopped on actually, and yeah, let's kind of bring that one to light to end off the show.
Well, I like to keep you on your toes there because whenever you send us the good old show notes rundown as far as this is what we're going to talk about, I'm like, oh, you missed this, this, and this, so I'm just gonna throw some curveballs your way. But this one is actually kind of a big one there as far as it up until today had just been simply known as Project 8, which was kind of cloak and dagger. We knew there was a women's professional soccer league coming to Canada. Didn't know format. We knew 4 of the locations, but you needed 6 in order to be sanctioned by Canada Soccer. So a lot of those details did finally come to fruition today. So it is now the NSL, or the Northern Super League. And it is going to be essentially the women's version of the Canadian Premier League on the men's side there. So finally, a domestic professional women's soccer association here in Canada. Big old golf clap for them getting that up and running. We've got Ottawa, Montreal, Calgary, Toronto, Vancouver, and look at how many times we're talking about Halifax this episode here.
Fantastic.
Yeah, finally, East Coast getting some
We're
representation out
we're
there.
sprinkling the subliminal messaging to the CFL right now just by saying Halifax a certain number of times. It's like a sleeper agent. You
Yeah,
mention it enough times, it'll click in.
we're also looking for sponsors. So if the Halifax Board of Tourism is listening to this episode as well now, we are not above shamelessly plugging the virtues of your beloved city out there.
nor nor would we be upset if any of the authentic donaire places out in Halifax would like to send us a sponsorship.
Or
Just
even
saying.
just the sauce. Just anyways.
Just the sauce.
Yeah. Don't know how well the donairs actually travel. but but yeah, getting back to the soccer league there. 25 games plus playoffs kicks off April 2025. This really was something that's been missing from
Yeah,
the professional sports scene on the women's side. You've seen it essentially Christine Sinclair done her whole career without any kind of opportunity to play locally and represent her country other than for the international squad there. So to be able to actually pay these women a livable salary, $1.5 million salary cap, and only 7, I guess, foreign born players, we'll call them. 7 non-Canadians permitted per roster. So it very much is going to be a domestic development league. And so think of what that Canadian women's Olympic team has been able to do
yeah,
without a domestic league to just essentially develop these players. And now think, 20, 25 years down the line, all of these graduates are probably going to be coming up through this program at some point and, kind of then getting filtered off to Europe or something like that. but huge for the sport.
Yeah, absolutely huge for the sport. And I mean, development is the key to any type of sustained success for any sport. And you just hit the nail on the head to say that this is literally the next beacon of light that is going to have the Canadian women's soccer team just absolutely stacked for the next 25 to 30 years and beyond. The fact that we're at this place now in sports where we're able to create these new leagues, give these women more opportunities to go out and showcase their abilities, play the game that they love, and make a salary while doing it. It's just such a great. I mean, I feel like we're talking about this so regularly now with the PWHL, now with this, the soccer league, and we mentioned it on the show before. Give our pal Mike Moriali a couple of nudges to create the CEBL women's division. But it's such a great time in sports for us to be able to celebrate these types of things because it gives opportunity to women who never had the opportunity before. And obviously you and I, have, I think, more of an affinity for the women's side of sport because obviously you've got 2 daughters, I've got 2 daughters. And it just, the fact that now this will kind of have a trickle down effect where there's going to be more teams that you're going to see in youth soccer. There's going to be more elite leagues in youth soccer, more camps in youth soccer, more opportunities for young girls to pick up a soccer ball, bring it to a field, and kick it around a little bit with their friends. Like that's
say, you pick up a soccer ball, you get a penalty. I don't know how good that euphemism.
Wait! I was told that football you're allowed to grab it with your hands.
Yeah, I could have been using my hands this whole time.
We're talking about the new Canadian Handball League. It's going to be fantastic. But regardless of us joking around about it or not, I mean, this just puts such a big smile on my face when you hear things like this because opportunity, development. Those are the key words when you hear, when you talk about youth sport. Now we have an opportunity to develop young girls to be able to play a game that they love and pursue something that they never were able to pursue before. So again, I'll give a second golf clap to, the decision makers for finally getting that across the line because this was long overdue and I cannot wait to see the opening result of how this kind of takes shape and where it goes in the first year.
Yeah, I cannot wait for the first round of expansion and for you to advocate that Yellowknife is the most deserving of all locales. We got to make this a true coast to coast league here. But
if we want to be inclusive, Kyle, we have to consider all the territories as well. It's not just the provinces.
Let's go. Iqaluit, Whitehorse, line them up.
We have a Northern Elite League. They only play for 1 month of the year because that's the only time that they can actually have soccer fields that don't have snow on them. But anyways.
They get all their home games in between April and May. They only play home games. They're traveling the rest of the
Their travel budget is just massive.
Yeah. But great news to come out of that. And I mean, you mentioned it already, a couple of girl dads. So we are very much looking forward to being able to just, even if it's just watching some of this stuff with the kids coming up as well too. It's fantastic. So
and that's such a great way to end off because obviously we're kind of talking about, oh, this is bad, this is not really good, oh, this kind of looks not what we want it to be. Ending off with smiles on our faces, talking about a brand new league that creates opportunities. I mean, that's a great way to end it, almost like we planned it that way, right?